Hey, my name is Jolt. Welcome to my channel. If you look around regarding sketchnoting, you will find two types of content. One talks about how you create sketchnotes. It's more the techniques of how you draw stick figures, cartoon, what paper to use, how you illustrate, how you organize yourself on a sheet of paper. And then the other is about how you tell a story, how you convey meaning, how you summarize ideas. And I think these are all super important topics and are great. But I miss something in the middle. I miss the glue that connects your individual pieces of sketchnotes, those beautiful drawings that you've created, or maybe those not so beautiful diagrams, and helps you connect it into a system to achieve some bigger meaning. So today, that's what we're going to talk about. I gave this talk at Sketchnote Week back in January, but I thought it's such an important topic that I wanted to replay it for you. Enjoy. So the story today starts here in Berzabuja. We were in Malta over the Christmas holidays with my wife. And on our way to the airport at the end of our trip, we stopped in this small town. This is a port town. And I was watching this shipyard with the cranes lifting the containers and placing them on the ship with the trucks moving around. And I think many people will look at this and feel like this is an eyesore. This is an ugly, big port with huge ships and dirty trucks, etc. When I looked at this, I saw a system, and this reminded me of something I read from Tiago Forte and Sönke Arendts, which is this idea that notes are the shipping containers of ideas. And in fact, shipping containers have transformed the world. It's hard to understand how huge an innovation the invention of shipping containers was. I read about this in The Box by Mark Levinson, because it's not trivial. In the past, every cubic meter of the ship was used because things were packed in the ships. It's not trivial to say that, okay, I'm going to have lots of wasted space, because containers have standard sizes and containers are not always 100% full. But with the entire system of ports and trucks and cranes and ships, etc., shipping containers transformed the world. They made today's economy possible, and they also created such efficiencies that in the past were impossible, and I'm advocating something similar that you can do with your visual notes. And so my question is, what is your port look like when it comes to visual thinking? We are focused on the goods, what's inside the box, the illustrations, the ideas we capture. But if we don't have a system for managing each of our containers, each of our sketch notes, each of our illustrations, each of our notes from conferences, from meetings, from books, from blog posts and whatever, then they will end up on the beach rusting, and you'll lose the value, or even more so, they become cluttered, they catch dust, and that's where your ideas stop. So we're going to be talking about your system, your port for handling your sketch notes, your visual notes. And just to continue on this idea of trucks and containers, this reminded me of the time when we were moving home from the Netherlands. So this is about 8 years ago, when we were packing the truck to move back to Hungary. And you know, when you pack a truck, you put everything into boxes, and here's all the valuables, everything we own, everything that's important to us inside the truck. And when we arrived, of course, these are unloaded to our house. And this is, of course, the same with your notes. You go to a conference, you create notes, you package everything into your container, and then you go home and you have that package there in your home. And of course, if you're traveling, for example, we were in Iceland a couple of years ago with a teardrop camper, it is fun to live out of suitcases for a couple of days. This was a fun 10 days and I loved every bit of it. But if we would not unpack our stuff from these boxes, living out of boxes for a prolonged period of time is simply not sustainable. So my invitation today to you is to stop living out of boxes and start building a visual personal knowledge management or PKM system. And today we are going to talk about two simple principles for building that system. We're going to talk about the idea of standardization, and we are going to talk about the idea of creating a system. And so let's first talk about standardization, and this is back to the idea I mentioned earlier about notes are the shipping containers of ideas. Think of notes as a standardized tool, build a workflow around them, and add some standards to your notes, because less choice is going to create more focus for you. You have a single format, you have one idea per page, and you have a simple, consistent workflow around it. And with that, it's much easier to manage your ideas from the conference where you collect the ideas to your storage where you're storing all of your great ideas connected. So in my practice, and here's my book, Sketch Your Mind, and I talk about this entire system in the book, so if you're interested, pick up a copy. In my practice, I found that applying three simple principles or three simple constraints can really transform your notes into this Lego set of visual ideas that you can interconnect. The first one is the card forcing function. The basic idea, as you can see here, like every slide in this presentation or every idea here, they are on a card, and the card gives you this frame of this limitation that you need to focus your ideas that they fit into that card. I love infinite canvases. On the other hand, those are very hard to manage later on. And we're going to come back to this in just 1 second in terms of what to do with infinite canvases. But the first and most important tool I recommend implementing is having this card forcing function. Set a rectangular area and put a single idea in that area, and that's your unit of idea in your illustration. The second constraint I implemented, and I'm using a digital tool, as you can see, to connect my ideas, is to have a simple, consistent color palette. I limited all my colors to a few, and I use those on every illustration I create. And this way, when I put these illustrations together into different storylines, like I'm putting these into this storyline today, but I didn't create these cards today. I created these years ago, but I'm now reusing them. Then they are going to fit into the style and the environment because they have same colors, and it again takes off lots of burden in terms of thinking about colors. And the third constraint I recommend is to have standard proportions. This is very important when it comes to an infinite canvas like Excalidraw and Obsidian. If you have standard font sizes, if you have standard icon sizes, if you have standard card sizes, they're going to be easy to click together. Think of Lego. Lego has blocks that are 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 units large, but they don't have 1.5 and 3 3/4 large. They have these unit of sizes, these standard proportions, and that ensures that when you fit them together, things click into place. All of these cards are the same width, same height, and then they look neat on the page. And of course, you might say that, Jolt, having these standards limits creativity. I tend to argue. So think of shipping containers and think of all the amazing things people have done, from food trucks to tiny houses to swimming pools to even sculpture. Containers, the fact that you have a unit of container doesn't mean that it kills creativity. It just guides creativity, and it helps reuse, and it helps a consistent process. And so in terms of how do you manage a large sheet of paper, how do you manage an infinite canvas, I take this idea from Doug Neal. His idea is to fill the canvas one block at a time, or one brick at a time. And each brick is a rectangular area with a single idea, and it actually follows this idea of a card forcing function. Each brick in the road is a card, and you place these bricks next to each other, and having these bricks together will create the overall presentation, the overall story you want to tell. And this approach is also great when you're doing live sketchnoting. It helps you partition the ideas that you're capturing, and it then helps you at home unpack this and sort these ideas, because they are not all over the place, but they are nicely already packaged, one idea per brick. Then, if you have these bricks, you can make them also modular. And in Obsidian Excalidraw, I have tools to decompose or deconstruct items into their own nodes. And then you can create different presentation, different stories. So let me show you how this works. And now I'm going to stop the presentation for a minute, and we're going to look at this truck. So if I click on this truck, then I get this list of links. We are not going to look at the second order links. I'm going to show you that in a second. But for now, I'm going to click here on the top one, because effectively this truck lives in its own node. So this is a separate Excalidraw drawing with only the truck included. And Obsidian has this tool called backlinks. Backlinks are links from other documents using this node. So you know, on the internet you have a link, and the link takes you from this place to the other place. Backlinks are this capability in Obsidian MD that will help you identify all of those documents that reference this document here. So the backlinks for my truck here are right here. And for example, you can see my presentation for Sketchnotes with a memory. This is the presentation we're looking at right now. But for example, I want to show you this presentation here, my book on a page for how to take smart notes by Sönke Arends. So here, and I'm going to just zoom out so you can see where it is. You can see that there's the container, but overall it's on this book on a page summary for how to take smart notes by Sönke Arends. And with this, I created this link between my presentation about Sketchnotes with a memory and this note right here. But of course, this can go further as well. So this truck is also built up of components. So for example, if I click on this ship right here, this ship is a downloaded icon. But what I want to show you here is the ship also has a number of backlinks. And these backlinks are places where I used this ship as well. For example, I used this on my idea integration board for lessons of history. And indeed, in lessons of history, Will and Arjan Duran talk about the impact of trade and power, or rather the impact of geography on what is shaping civilizations. And so you can see that immediately I was taken to this other visual node through the connection of ships. And by the way, this ship is super relevant here. When I created my original note about the truck, I wasn't thinking about trade routes, etc. But in fact, it does serve the same sort of purpose, and I can even see a logic for how the same idea of these routes, the geography, and that was separate learning when I was reading lessons of history, when I realized that indeed the internet is the new geography, and the way I'm packaging ideas, for example, into such presentations creates new trade routes of sharing my ideas. But long story short, that is how this entire presentation here is built up. I have these units of ideas, and these units of ideas are taken from other nodes, and these units of ideas are then, if I just move back here for a second, you can see here that these are built, a story is built from icons that will build atomic ideas, and when I put together these atomic ideas, I get a story, and so on. You can take these bigger stories and build even bigger ones. I'm going to show you an example of that as well. But that's principle one, that this standardization, thinking of a node as a shipping container and applying some constraints around it, enables a workflow. And now let's talk about that workflow, because if you look at this picture right here, this is an aerial picture of the same port. You can see that it's much more than just the ship and the cranes. There's a whole system out here with all the containers. So this is what you can also observe on this aerial photo. If you zoom in, you will see that on the port, each of these sections are numbered. So these containers are organized in a very strict, neat system. So, of course, the right goods or the right parcels find their destinations, and so on. And so this is the system I'm advocating. And let me show you how I'm building this system, because effectively the other part of my system, one is this embedding of Lego pieces that we looked at with the truck and how it builds together. The other is, I think of every illustration as, you could call it, a postcard. On the front, I have the image. On the back, I have some notes that give me additional metadata about that image, that give me text. So again, if I look at my shipping container here and I open the back side of this note, then here you can see that, so this is my truck right here. I have some shortcuts to flip the page over. This is exactly the same file. So I have one file called How to Take Smart Notes. Notes are shipping containers of ideas. So this is the name of the file. And on the back side, so on the textual side of this note, I have things like who's the author, Tiago Forte. What's the source? So this is the blog post where I read about this. I implement the shipping container with the card forcing function, and so on. You can see all of these notes here. And in fact, if I click on the card forcing function, then it opens this card. If I flip this over, you can see that this is actually the image that we saw in the presentation as well when I was talking about constraints. But on the back side of this, again, I have a whole bunch of notes about different components, or I have DocNeil here, for example, as my source, and so on. This is how it continues on. And of course, if I now look at the backlinks of this, then I can see that I'm using this card forcing function in other notes. For example, in this illustration right here, which is, if I flip the page over, you will see this is what I call the mindset framework, and this is all of my cards. Here's the mindset framework, all of my cards, including the ones we looked at. So we looked at briefly the standard proportions, we looked at Legoized ideas, we looked at simple colors, we also looked at the card forcing function right here. And of course, there are many other cards here as well. But you can see that this overview is yet another presentation, yet another reuse of the cards that I'm presenting to you in today's presentation. But also you can see how through the truck, through the notes on the back side of the truck. So again, if we come here and I open this and flip this over, so the way we got here was here. I have this link that this idea, notes are shipping containers of ideas, is implemented with the card forcing function. It's also discussed in this book, and in fact I have the relevant section of the blog post copied here, because for me that's just helpful to have everything in one place. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to show you, that every one of these cards has a backside with some stories. Also, this presentation has a backside with my notes and my ideas for this session itself. And they are, of course, these blocks that I can build into one another, and having the links and the metadata on the backside helps me connect these ideas into a network or into a system. So this takes us to close to the end of the session. There's one more thing I want to highlight to you, or want to explain to you, and that is my concept about 4D PKM, four-dimensional personal knowledge management, because it all starts with one dimension. One dimension is when you're jotting ideas down. Typically, you write them down in a sheet of paper, and then you store that paper somewhere. Typically, if you write, then you will be reading top left, bottom right in a linear way. If you have some sketch notes here, then of course that's already slightly better. But these are disconnected, dispersed individual notes without any system. Now you can create a system for filing, so you can have various notebooks neatly packed on a shelf, and that's already slightly better. Also, you can flip the pages of your notebook or your sketchnote book, and then pages one after the other will give you a chronological logic, but you're still not linking these to one another. It's only a neater organization of ideas, but this is now two-dimensional because you have your notes and you have the individual documents organized into a filing system. The third level is 3D PKM, is when you're creating links. And links are, for example, the ones I clicked in the presentation where I went from one document to the other. Links are what you will find on the internet as well. They create this web of interconnected ideas, but if each of your notes are text-based, and yes, I think in this case, most of your notes are going to be illustrations, but if your notes are text-based, then you're only using half of your brain, because your notes are going to, you still need to read your notes top left to bottom right, but at least you have them connected into this system. And what I advocate for here, and I think this community is definitely on a good way in that direction, or on a good path, is to have visual notes interconnected into this web of systems, because I think that's exactly the difference, that today the internet and most note-taking systems allow you to connect documents, but they don't allow you to connect visual components like I'm doing here. Each of these components are individual pieces that I deconstructed from my notes, and I connected them into a larger picture. So my advocacy is to create a 4D PKM visual first system, adding text on the back for clarity and for metadata, but working with a system like this. And so in the end, if there's one thing you take away from today's discussion, is to shift your mindset from visual thinking as a tool where you have mind maps, sketchnotes, diagrams, and use them as a tool, to thinking about visual thinking as a system. There you have this system of organizing your notes, deconstructing your notes, connecting ideas through visual connections. And this concludes our journey today. I hope you enjoyed the ride. This is the map that we traveled. And all that's left for me to say is to bring the new Sketch Your Mind community to your attention. And within that, I want to highlight cohort 16 of the Visual Thinking Workshop, which is coming up in just 2 weeks. The Visual Thinking Workshop is the place where we put all of this theory into practice. This is where I help you create the system that we just talked about. In each workshop, we take a specific book. This time we're going to be reading the amazing book by Jefferson Fisher, The Next Conversation, and we're going to turn it into visual Lego blocks. I love Fisher's quote here at the top: "What you say truly has the power to change everything." And this is what the book is about, and I think what better book to read when we're talking about visual thinking and visual communication. The workshop takes you through these 5 steps. We start with creating an idea atlas. These are highly interactive live sessions. Then we create concept visuals. This is always a super active part of the workshop. When we bring ideas together, you bring quotes from the book, and together we create visuals. Then we spend some time storyboarding, creating the outline of how we want to tell what we've learned from the book. Then there's a session about visual Zettelkasten, creating our notes, our permanent notes, and linking it with other visuals in our system. And finally, we have our showcase, and we put together, we compile the book on a page. The cohort is supported by a self-paced course that takes us through the mindset framework. There are 44, I think, core lessons here. The course has 71 lessons in total. It's a complete self-paced course that you're going to do alongside participating in the live sessions, and this is going to give you a full system in hand. And the workshop itself runs from 16th of May until 28th of June. The way it's structured is there are live sessions. Live sessions happen on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday afternoon Europe time, Saturday morning US time, and Sunday morning Europe time, and that's Sunday afternoon Asia Pacific time. So the workshop runs in 2 time zones. The sessions are always duplicated or mirrored, so you have everyone has a live session experience. And on top, of the live sessions, we also have so-called office hours. There are altogether 6 office hours during the course. These are on Thursdays and Fridays, again, for the 2 time zones. And the office hours are your opportunity to ask anything. This is where you can roll up your sleeves and I can help you build your PKM system. And the visual thinking workshop is part of this bigger concept I call the Sketch Your Mind community. I encourage you to check out the Sketch Your Mind community as well. By the way, if you join the visual thinking workshop, you get 1 year of membership free as a gift for joining the workshop. The community itself focuses on 3 pillars. Pillar 1 is the mastery of the tool. So this is all about Obsidian and Excalidraw, and this is more of a technical how-to pillar. This is where you have courses like Excalidraw Essentials, Excalidraw Mastery, and we are building a complete tutorial hub with visual daily notes and PDF++ annotation and lots of other important workflows. Then we have a second pillar that's going to start in July this year. That's the Sketch Your Life pillar. And Sketch Your Life is about visual frameworks, mental models, and it's about thinking. It's the whole purpose of why you're taking notes. You're taking notes, you're creating visuals because you want to have better thoughts. And finally, concept visuals, that's coming later this year, which is really the bread and butter of creating visual communications. It's the process for creating impactful visuals. And then as an membership upgrade, you can get the visual thinking workshop, either the self-paced course or the cohort. I highly encourage joining the cohort. It's, I think, the best value for money for getting on board with this entire mindset, for building connections, to have some accountability with a group of people and to go through the entire process. And then you can use the community as an ongoing support network to build your visual thinking habit, your visual thinking system. So thank you for taking the time to watch this. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope to see you in the visual thinking workshop. Thank you.